Congresswoman Sara Jacobs. She represents San Diego County in the U.S. House of Representatives. Of course, San Diego, America's finest city, as they like to say there. Sara Jacobs, welcome to Story Is for the first time.
Thank you.
You are on the Foreign Affairs Committee and the Armed Services Committee, so this Iran thing is right in your wheelhouse. What do you want to see happen there?
Well, look, first of all, I think the idea that we're even in this position where we're talking about military strikes to try and compel Iran into a worse deal than the deal that Donald Trump pulled us out of is ridiculous. And there's no congressional authorization, not to mention that, you know, whatever he does, is it regime change? Is it something else? Like, there's no day after plan. And frankly, we tried regime change in Iran before. It didn't go very well.
So what do you want to see happen?
Yes. What I would like to see is diplomacy, and what I would like to see is a real effort to try and use the diplomatic track to get to a solution without all of this fear-mongering and all of the money being spent sending like so much of U.S. military to the region.
Critics would say, look, Iran, their leadership, bad dudes. Look at the way they just handled the protesters, literally murdering people in the streets, that this regime has had years of problems. And so why should we trust them when clearly they've lied to us so many times in the past?
Well, I'm not saying we should trust them. But let's also be clear, there are a lot of bad people who run countries all over the world, right? I'm the ranking member on the subcommittee on Africa. There are a lot of bad dudes who run countries.
Yeah.
We should not be in the business of militarily taking them out. That is not the right solution.
Is there any appetite in Congress to actually push back on some of this in terms of congressional authorization? And are there any Republicans willing to go on that issue with you?
Well, I think there is, right? In the House, we have the Massey bill on war powers saying that the president does not have authorization to use military action against Iran that I think will be coming up for a vote this next week when we're back. The Senate has a similar one with Rand Paul and Tim Kaine. So, I know a lot of my Republican colleagues privately tell me they know it's not a good idea, and I'm hopeful that when the vote comes, they will vote that way.
Meanwhile, right now there is a partial government shutdown happening, and yet Congress is out of session. Is there any actual conversation going on between the two sides to try to bring funding to the Department of Homeland Security?
The honest answer is no. President Trump has refused to meet with Democratic leaders. Our Democratic leaders have sent an offer. The White House sent back a counteroffer that was, frankly, paltry and did not have any of the protections that we're looking for. And let's be clear, we're not looking for that much. We're looking for no masks, judicial warrants, kind of basic things, frankly, things I don't actually think are enough. But these are the basic things we're looking for, and they won't even agree to that.
Is there a compromise that you would agree to? What would you be willing to give on?
Look, I think that these are common sense things we're asking for. We're asking for judicial warrants. That's literally in the Constitution.
But there are a lot of folks, though, that say if you have to do a judicial warrant to do every one of these arrests, it would basically stop ICE's ability to do its job. And that Democrats in the past supported this way of going about things.
I mean, it's literally in the Constitution that you have to have a warrant. There's no unlawful search and seizure. And so
You're saying a warrant to go into somebody's house.
Correct.
Right.
A warrant to go into someone's house. There needs to be some reason why you're pulling people over, not just saying you look like you might be from another country. Lots of these folks are actually here legally. And he said he was going after criminals. If you look at San Diego County, the majority of the people that they've arrested in San Diego County have no criminal record. They are literally going after our neighbors, our friends, our workforce. They're going after people as they're going to get their green card interviews. These are people who are literally trying to do it the right way, and they're still picking them up and detaining them and deporting them.
So it doesn't seem like there's going to be a deal before Tuesday. The State of the Union is Tuesday night. Some Democrats are choosing not to attend. Are you going to go?
I don't plan on attending, no.
Why is that? I mean, and isn't that kind of disrespectful to the institution of the presidency and the institution of Congress?
I mean, I think what's disrespectful to the institution of Congress is the fact that this president and this administration do not abide by congressionally passed laws and statutes, completely have zero care for or respect for the rule of law, literally are going against court orders. That's what's disrespectful. I'm not going to sit there and listen to Donald Trump lie and try and say the economy is doing well when everyone I know in San Diego can barely get by. I'm not going to sit there and listen to him say they're going after criminals when we know the majority of people they're going after have no criminal record and they're killing U.S. citizens without any accountability.
Although we'll see what happens in terms of the killing of the citizens, and we'll see on that front. But in terms of the Epstein files, the news of the day is what's happening with former Prince Andrew now being arrested. Yeah. What do you make of the compare and contrast in the way that the British government and the United States government are handling the Epstein files?
Look, I'm glad that other countries are trying to pursue real accountability for the horrendous crimes in the Epstein files. And I hope that our country can do the same. And I know that when Democrats are in power, we're going to, because as far as I'm concerned, regardless of who you are, if you're a prince, if you're a president, you should be held accountable if you did and participated in these horrific things that we are reading about. And not to mention, Donald Trump is mentioned 38,000 times just in the redacted version of the files, right? Jamie Raskin alleges that in the unredacted versions, it's over 1 million. I haven't had a chance to go read them yet myself. But like, we need to be holding everyone accountable for what they did to enable this man to sex traffic children. That's what we're talking about.
Right, and there's not a lot of conversation about them. We should point out Donald Trump has not been charged with a crime yet, and there's no evidence that we've seen so far of criminal wrongdoing, but we have not seen all the evidence yet because so much of it is redacted.
Despite, again, a congressional law saying that they have to release it back to their,
Sara Jacobs, thank you for coming in. Great to see you in person, and thanks